Welcome back to In Between Sundays. I am Marco Arroyo. Today I'm going to be reviewing my conversation with Trent Horn, and I'm so excited to do it. Let's get into it. And if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel, consider supporting on Patreon, and leave me a comment. What do you think about my conversation with Trent Horn? Where do you think I went wrong? Where do you think I went right? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about all this. I just want to learn, just want to grow, and hash out ideas, share them between people. So please give me your thoughts. I'm very curious about it. But number one, that conversation was such a blessing to me, and I can't wait to have more conversations with people about it. So if there are people that you think would be a good person to talk to, even if they're outside of my stratosphere and they're more high profile, very high profile, I will try to reach out to them. There's some people that I've mentioned, like William Albrecht. I'd love to talk with him about church fathers. I'd love to talk with people like needgot.net about baptismal regeneration. I'm trying to reach out to these people and have these conversations with them, among others. So who do you think I should talk to? Who do you think I could talk to? Leave it in the comments. Send me a message if you're a Patreon supporter, especially. I will really try to prioritize that, so consider supporting on Patreon as well. But I want to have more conversations with people. I love the dialogue platform. I love to, in good faith, just have a nice conversation with somebody and try to get to the bottom of something, or at least just try to make some progress in a conversation. It was very fun to do. And again, there was really no pressure. I didn't feel any pressure that really talking to Trent. I just felt like we were just two guys hashing out ideas, which is what we were. And that's really what it's all about. So I love that very much. But what was my goal in my conversation with Trent? My goal was mainly to understand Trent, to understand Catholicism. That's why I let him do most of the talking. I think there's a lot of straw men out there about Catholicism. A lot of people think that they understand Catholicism, and they really don't. And I myself, having a lot of Catholic family, had many misunderstandings with Catholic family that practices in Catholicism. I had many misunderstandings about Catholicism, so I wanted to just understand what it is, so I can even know if I agree with it, or what parts of it I agree with and what parts of it I disagree with in the first place. And so I just wanted to understand. So if you're wondering why didn't Marco push back more and more and more, a lot of it was just me trying to hear it for the first time and then responding based off of some of my initial impressions. That's really what I was doing. And it was very, very cool to be the first guy that Trent talked to that believes in baptismal regeneration, the idea that if you're going to be saved, you must be baptized. But we do differ on infant baptism. I'm the first person he's ever had a dialogue with that believe that. And so I would love to be the first person to dialogue with a lot of other people of different groups, religions, and belief systems, who is talking to them, who believes that baptism is necessary but doesn't believe in infant baptism. I'd love to talk to Lutherans. I'd love to talk to Calvinists and other people like that. That would be so much fun. And again, just to have easy dialogues, no crazy like debate prep or something like that. And I'm not really interested in like formal debate kind of stuff. Other people are, good for them. I just want to have some dialogues, and not really with the goal to win, but just with the goal of making progress and understanding each other. I think that's a great thing to do. So I was very excited about being the first guy who believes in baptismal regeneration but denies infant baptism to talk to Trent Horn in a public platform like that. But now I want to give my shower thoughts, my car ride home thoughts on my conversation with Trent Horn. What are the things? And I knew that this would happen. I knew that leaving this conversation on the car ride home, Trent and I had lunch afterwards, and I didn't have the thoughts then, but on the car ride home, I knew I was going to go, oh, I should have said that, or oh, I should have pushed back here, and I didn't really think about it, or oh, man, that would have been a good question to ask him, following up on something that he said. I knew that was going to happen, and I just accepted it. I wasn't really stressed out about that, and it happens to everyone. I know that Trent even told me that kind of stuff happened to him as well, when he's had debates with people, and he goes, oh, that would have been the perfect thing to say. And so it just never ends. But if I could talk to Trent again about this stuff, and I think that I will, and if I could talk to another Catholic about this stuff, which I really hope to and I plan to, I would ask them these things, or at least these parts of the conversation would be things that I follow up on a little bit more. I won't replay the videos here just for the sake of time, but even if you didn't see them, you'll understand the conversation just based off of how I describe it here. Number one would be something that I left all the way to the end in the rapid fire questions from Romans chapter 7 and verse number 9. In Romans 7, verse number 9, and I asked Trent about this here, and this was a question from a supporter. I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. And if you want more of the full context here, Paul is talking about the law, his relationship with the law, And then he says, is the law sin? Certainly not. On the contrary, I would not have known sin except through the law, for I would not have known covetousness unless the law had said, you shall not covet. But sin, taking opportunity by the commandment, produced in me all manner of evil desire. For apart, and notice that, sin produced the manner of evil desire. For apart from the law, sin was dead. I was alive once without the law, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. And the commandment, which was to bring life, I found to bring death. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it killed me. And so the question that I asked Trent was basically this in verse number 9. When the law was introduced to him, and this is actually kind of similar to what Jesus says in John 15:22, that before the law was introduced to him, he was alive. He was not guilty. And Jesus in John 15:22 says something to this effect as well, that they were responsible or accountable because they had heard Jesus' teaching. And so here you have Paul saying, before I was introduced to the law, I was alive. But then when the law was introduced, it exposed all this sin that is within me. Sin took advantage by the commandment and produced all manner of evil desire in me. So when Paul says he was alive without the law, is he talking about prior to the existence of the law? No. It seems to me that Paul is talking about he was alive as a child, as an infant, and he didn't have the law. He couldn't understand the law, and so therefore he was not guilty. He was not dead. He was not in need of this kind of regeneration as someone who was completely outside of a relationship with God, lost in their sins, and not someone that God would save and take to heaven if they died before their baptism, for example, before their infant baptism. This is, I think, a really important verse for this. And when I went back to Trent's answer, and please go back and check it out, it's towards the end of our conversation. Trent just basically said that he didn't think that was a very convincing point to make from Romans 7 verse 9. And it's about the works of the law. It's about, and he talked about the overall theme. From his answer, I really do think that this is strong, and if I could talk to Trent again, I would want us to dig into Romans 7 a little bit more, if not the rest of Romans, really, a little bit more, and to see how, contextually even, I think that is borne out here in Romans 7 and verse number 9. It does seem very clear that there's this overall theme throughout the scriptures where infants are very, very different from just non-Christians. And that brings me to the next thing that we talked about, which was the conversation about where do infants go when they die. Now, my paradigm is always, it's basically always been heaven and hell. And if an infant dies, where do they go? Either heaven or hell. And so for me, all I had to do, I felt, was talk a lot about the Old Testament and how there are many instances in different passages, and you can go back and watch this in the video on infant baptism. There are many, and infant salvation as well. There are many instances where God seeks to pass over in judgment on account of babies, because of infants, because of children, because of people like in Jonah 4:11 who do not know their right hand from their left. And he's talking about, in all actuality, infants. He's talking about children, people who don't have total human reasoning yet, moral reasoning, but they have a more basic existing animal-like reasoning is what you see there in Jonah 4:11. And so I think that all I needed to do, or I thought that all I needed to do was just point out that God didn't want to punish them, and he didn't treat them the way he treated non-Christians. And that is pretty clear. God did not seek to treat them the way and that's an important word, he didn't seek to treat them the way he treated non-Christians. Sometimes they were punished physically in this life alongside of ungodly people in the Old Testament. Now, I'm saying non-Christians, but you know what I mean, people who did not know God, people who disobeyed, and enemy nations and things like that in the Old Testament. God did not seek to punish them like he wanted to punish those who were actively committing sin. He wanted to treat them differently, and he wanted to spare those nations because of those innocent infants, because of those innocent children. And then I went to the New Testament, that the things that are deserving of wrath, like in Romans chapter 1 and on, for example, there you find all these things that are listed, and none of them can apply to babies. And so that was a solid argument, and Trent even accepted that. And he even said, okay, what you've been able to prove is that babies don't go to hell, but you have not proved that babies go to heaven. Now, if only heaven and hell exist, if they're not going to hell, then they're going to heaven. But that's where Trent introduced the idea to me of limbo, which I had not known about. If I was more well-read, I would have known about limbo, but I didn't know about limbo. It's just these medieval philosophers Catholics came up with this idea, this thought, this logically deduced place, I guess we can call it. It's not a place you read about in the Bible or anything like that, and it's not even a place that has been infallibly declared by the Catholic Church, by the magisterium, the teaching office of the church. But it's a place that they believe must exist or likely does exist as a result of this, because they go, okay, babies don't deserve wrath because they haven't committed sin, but at the same time, they have not been baptized, which is what would send them to heaven. So therefore, a third location must exist. So therefore, they have Christians, non-Christians, and then the unbaptized infants, and limbo is this place on the outskirts of hell where they don't suffer, but they also don't exist in total happiness and joy in heaven with God. So they just have this natural state of happiness. And I'm not sure what exactly that means. I would love to ask Trent a little bit more about limbo. The last thing that I would like to follow up a little bit more on, and maybe push back a little bit more on, is the idea where Trent had said over and over again, and I agree with this, I didn't disagree with this necessarily, that God doesn't owe anyone heaven. And that is true. I'm not going to argue with that. God does not owe anyone heaven. I think that even if I was the most awesome person on the face of the earth, God doesn't owe me heaven. He doesn't have to take me to heaven. If my obedience was basically perfect, God still doesn't owe me heaven. I am an ant. I'm created in God's image, and that's the only good thing about me, but it's because it's his image and not me, not my image of goodness. And so I agree that God doesn't owe anyone heaven, but we also should point out that God does want everyone to go to heaven. He does want everyone to go to heaven. And again, you have passages like in 2 Peter 3 and verse number 9, that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But he also requires repentance for people who have committed sin. But what about the people, even if we were to presuppose original sin, what about the people who could never change that state on their own doing, on their own work? Again, if you're a person who believes that you must do something in order to be saved, whatever that might be, what about a person, let's say they're born with original sin, but there is not a single thing they can do about whether or not they're going to be saved? Not a single thing they can do about it, for better or for worse. Wouldn't God want to save them? And I think absolutely. That is, when we read the scriptures, that is exactly God's desire. So does anyone deserve heaven? No. But does God want these unbaptized infants to go to heaven, who even the ones that do have original sin, if we were to suppose original sin, which I don't agree with? Yes, God does want them to be saved. And if they have nothing that they could possibly do to affect this process, a God of grace and a God of mercy as he is, a God who wants all to be saved and treats us according to our own ability and capacity, I think we see that very clearly in Scripture as well, would not treat the unbaptized infant the way he would treat me, someone who is just living in pure and total rebellion against God. And so do I believe that infants are in need of baptism when they're born? No, I don't. I still don't see that scripturally. Again, it's very complicated, very difficult conversation. I would agree with that. It would be crazy to say this is just open and shut simple. Black and white simple, it just takes 30 seconds to hash all this out. Of course not. I mean, I talked to Trent for a long time about it, and we'll probably talk some more with other people about it. I really hope that we do. But I think that the scriptures are still solidly on the side of saying infants are safe. They're safe from God's wrath, and being safe from God's wrath, therefore, if they died, they will go to heaven. They will be with God forever and ever. But let me know what you think. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Consider supporting the Patreon, the best way you can support the channel. But let me know who you want me to talk to next and what we could talk about next as well. I'm not an expert in everything, but I'm very curious to learn. And I would be happy to learn and give more time to study about certain things and things like that, whether Catholics or Calvinists or Baptists, whoever it might be. I'm very, very curious about this stuff. And I love having these dialogues. I don't feel any desire to win or to destroy someone with facts and logic. I just want to have productive conversations. Let me know what you think. I love you so much. God bless you. I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.